and welcome back to Learning Kitchen Live. I am Beth and I'm one of the registered dietitians here at Community Servings. Learning Kitchen Live is made possible by our friends at Boston Scientific, so just want to say thank you to them for making this programming possible. So today I'm going to be making a Morning Glory breakfast cake, and the reason I wanted to make this cake is that it's not, a super sugar-free or, like guilt-free treat, but it's a nice breakfast if you're one of those people that really loves to have like a muffin or a piece of cake for breakfast. And this is sort of a slightly healthier version of it, and it's a really versatile recipe. So it's got some spices, it's got some fruit and vegetables, so it has some nutritional value to it without being, overly over the top like a big bakery muffin. So what I'm going to be doing in this cake is carrots and apples and some pineapple, but this recipe can be mixed up however you like. So, at the end of the summer, if you have a ton of zucchini, you could use that instead of the carrots. You could use pears, you could use peaches, anything you really like, you can add spices to it. I'm also going to be using some pumpkin seeds on top, but you can use any nuts or seeds or anything that you like. So it's a super versatile recipe. And so from the original recipe, I have cut a little bit of the sugar as well. So, I think between the carrots and the apples, it's going to be plenty sweet. And it's going to come together really easily. So it's just a one bowl cake. And I am modifying this recipe from a book that I have that's all one bowl snack cakes, which I've been really enjoying cooking my way through. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. So we're going to start with just one big carrot. And I'm just going to grate it up on the box grater. And so we'll just grate it. You can do this in a food processor as well. If you don't have a box grater like this, you also could just use a regular vegetable peeler and make like thin strips and then just kind of chop them up. You wouldn't want them to be too thick. So we're just gonna, this is a pretty big carrot, but we're gonna use almost the whole thing. You need about a cup of carrots. And if you, I'm gonna upload the recipe to Facebook after this, but you'll notice that I actually put the gram weights into the recipe for this week. And the reason for that is that I love to bake by weight. I think it makes everything easier and more exact, and it saves you a bunch of dirty dishes too, although you would not know that by all the equipment I have here today. So I have just a small scale like this. These are really inexpensive, like $10, $15. And so what I'm gonna do is just put everything on the scale, and every time I add a new ingredient, I'm gonna hit the button that says tare, and it's gonna zero it out so that the next ingredient is gonna go in. So measure. So it's just gonna go in. I'm a little short, so I'm just gonna grate a little bit more. So this is great for flour, that way you know you didn't measure too much, sugar, and it just saves you from having to get out all those measuring cups. All right, that ought to do it. So, and add exactly 147 grams, so close enough. And so next I'm going to do just one small apple. You can peel it if you want to, but you really don't need to, and this is going to grate up real quickly. Apples are pretty juicy, so we'll just get a bunch of sweet apple shreds, and then also the kind of the juice will be coming in with there too. So it's going to make a nice moist cake and add some nice natural sweetness. Wow, you can see everything flying. And so, the fruits in there are going to add some nice flavor, but they're also going to add a little bit of fiber to the cake and some vitamins. So, always benefits of things, even when we're eating something that's sweet. All right, so we'll throw that in. Okay. And then we're going to add some unsweetened, or actually first I'm going to add some pineapple. So I have some canned pineapple that's just in 100% juice, and then I drain the juice out, so I'm not adding a lot of extra sugar. You can also just use fresh pineapple. I'm pretty sure you could use frozen pineapple as well. So I'm just going to These are chunks, but I kind of want it to be a little smaller, so I'm just gonna throw my, excuse me, run my knife right through these. And when I mix it up, they'll probably break down a little bit further as well. You can also just buy the crushed pineapple as well. Alright, so we'll throw that in there. And then the coconut. So I have unsweetened flaked coconut. If you don't like coconut, just leave it out. So I'm going to measure this by grams as well. So it's going to call for 30 grams. There we go. So not too much. And then the last little flavor enhancer that we're going to add to this is the zest of a lemon. So it's not going to add too much to it. So if you don't have a lemon or you don't like lemon, just leave it out. It's just going to add like a little brightness to the recipe. You could also add like some vanilla extract or another type of extract if you wanted to add a little like extra flavoring. But the lemon's just going to brighten it up a little bit. So just, you want to make sure that you stop before you get too far down on the white. Otherwise you're going to get like a bitter flavor. Because on the outside is really where all that good sweet lemony flavor is. But as soon as you start to get the white, it's going to be really bitter. So that'll do that. And then you just gotta kind of scoop it out from the inside. Okay, so those are all of our sort of fruits and veggies that are gonna go in here. So I'm just gonna give these a little toss so that everything is mixed up. And now we're gonna start adding our more, traditional baking ingredients. So we're gonna add some sugar. So this calls for 2/3 of a cup of sugar. Which is less than the original recipe, but that is going to be 130 grams. So I'm going to hit tare again and just pour my sugar in until I see 130 grams. Sticking to the bottom there. There we go. And then I'm going to add 2 eggs, which I've been having sit out so that they're at room temperature. But in a recipe like that, like this, where you're not getting like a lot of air and it's not like a real high rising tender cake, it's not completely critical to have things at room temperature, but it helps a little. All right, so we'll get that going together. And then we're going to add some canola oil, and I have 2/3 of a cup of that as well. So just dump that in. Now it's going to start to look like some batter. Like that. So normally when you're baking a cake, usually they have you put your wet ingredients in one bowl and your dry ingredients in another bowl, and you really don't need to do that for a recipe like this. So you wouldn't want to add the flour just yet, because if you add it and then you keep mixing, you're going to make your cake really tough. So that's going to be the very last thing that we add. So we're going to add some spices, some salt, our leaveners. We'll get it nice and distributed and well mixed, and then we'll add our flour and just until it combines at the very end. So you can see how quickly this comes together. So we're going to add some salt. So the spices and the salt and the leaveners we'll have to do with measuring spoons. We can't, we could do them by gram, but we're not going to. So we're going to do 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. And then we're going to do 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. And when you're doing this, because we're not sifting it into the dry ingredients, you want to kind of like sprinkle it around so it doesn't clump, and you just make sure it's pretty well distributed. So that's 1.5 teaspoons. And then same with the baking soda. So we need 1/2 teaspoon of. Alright, so we'll get those mixed in, and we're just going to add some spices, and then we'll add our flour and get it in the oven. So this is going to be a really quick recipe. And very versatile as well. Okay, so I've got some cinnamon and some ginger. You could also add some nutmeg or cardamom or any of those like warm spices that you like, allspice. Even just some of the mixed spices too, so like pumpkin pie spice or apple pie spice, any of those things on hand would work great. So we'll do a half a teaspoon of each of those. And just like with the leaveners, you want to kind of get it distributed as much as possible around while you're sprinkling it in, especially cinnamon and ginger. They can get kind of clumped up, so I'm just going to kind of sprinkle it over the top like that. That's the cinnamon. And then ginger. You also, like, if you had these straight from a small spice jar, you could just measure them right into your palm, because for things like spices and you know, you don't have to be exact, as opposed to things like sugar and flour and leaveners, where we really want to be precise to get the best results when we're baking. Okay, and last but not least, I am using white whole wheat flour. So whole wheat flour is great to use because it has more fiber and more nutritional value than white flour. But sometimes if you bake a cake with regular whole wheat flour, it can get kind of like grainy or dry. So what I'm using is white whole wheat flour, so it's a little bit more like softer and less, like has less of a dark color as well. But you can use regular flour for this. You could try regular whole wheat flour and see how it comes out. And I always like to recommend to people who are just starting out baking with whole grains is to do like a 50-50. So maybe half whole wheat, half white flour, see how it comes out, and just kind of play with the ratio. So I'm just gonna tear out my scale again, and then this needs 160 grams of flour. And just go straight from here. And there we go, 160. So what I like to do is get it started with the whisk just to kind of get it distributed, but the batter is going to be kind of thick and it's going to start to stick into my whisk. So once I get it going, I like to switch to either a wooden spoon or a rubber spatula like this, just so I don't end up with like all the carrots and chunks of apples and pineapple and stuff in the tines of my whisk. And like I said, you don't want to overmix a batter like this. You just want to mix it until you don't see flour anymore. So kind of with a gentle hand, you can see I'm just like scooping up from the bottom. And just making sure that I get every bit of the dry flour mixed in without really vigorously whisking it, so that I don't get a real tough cake. All right, so that's it for this homemade cake. Now I'm going to be baking this in an 8x8 inch square pan, which I've sprayed with some nonstick spray, but you could bake this in a 9x5 loaf pan, or you could make it as muffins too if you wanted to have these as like a individualized breakfast treat. The baking time will of course vary. I think in a loaf pan it will probably take a little longer. I would say muffins would probably take like 15-20 minutes, depending on how big you make them. This is going to take about 30 minutes. Alright, so I'm just going to get it into the pan. And you just want to make sure that you get it spread nice and evenly. Got to get every last bit. Whoops. And so we'll just take our spatula and spread it as evenly as you possibly can. The more even that you get a cake or anything that you're going to bake, the more evenly that your item will bake. So I won't have like one spot that's overcooked and one spot that's undercooked. Okay, and then we're going to put some pumpkin seeds on top. But like I said in the beginning, you could use pecans or walnuts or sunflower seeds, anything that you like. It's just going to add a little protein, a little extra fiber, and some nice crunch to the top. So if you were doing these as muffins, you could just sprinkle a few on top. And it calls for 2 tablespoons, but again, something like this, you know, you can just kind of eyeball it. If you really love them, you can put lots on. And you can see the nice little green color. I've got some nice community servings, orange and green going on today. Okay, and so I've preheated my oven to 350. And this is going to bake for about 30 minutes. I'm going to pop it in. But the good news is I already have one going. So You won't have to wait the whole full 30 minutes, and you'll be able to see what it looks like all finished. So you can see it's nice and golden brown. So you want to just bake it until it's brown on top, and a tester, when you stick it into like a toothpick or a knife or something, comes out without any batter on it. So got that sliced. Whoops. Sorry, we're gonna have to leave that now. Okay, so I have a knife, and just you can cut these. The recipe is basically designed to make about 16 servings, so you want to cut it into 16 squares. Whoops, I did not do a good job of that. You can see it's a nice moist cake. This one is slightly underbaked, but that's okay. So I definitely encourage you to try this, mix it up however you like. Use zucchini, use carrots, use whatever nuts you like, whatever fruits you like. You could even add some raisins for some extra sweetness and some extra fiber. Try it with whole wheat flour, and if you're so inclined, try baking with a scale to see how quickly you can throw something together. You can see how quickly that came together. So that's it for me today. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments, and I will be posting the recipe again. And thanks for joining us today.